Everybody, we are in chapter 3 and we are finding missing angles. It's going to be so much fun. This is Miss Osier
and Miss Perrier,
and we are going to get started. So let's first remember some definitions. An acute angle is going to be between 0 and 90. Most people just say less than 90, but that's the definition of an acute angle.
An obtuse angle is an angle which is greater than 90, so it's either greater or larger than 90.
Straight angle is going to have that degree measure of exactly 180.
And then adjacent angles is two angles that are next to one another. You just need to know that they are next to, and they also share a common ray.
So you would say this in a sentence like angle ABD and angle CBD are adjacent to one another. They're next to each other. That's what adjacent means, if you can just remember that adjacent means next to, and then the ray that they share is ray BD. So now we're just going to work through some vocabulary. So for the first one, we're looking for an angle that's formed by two rays, and that's with the common endpoint called the vertex. The vertex is that endpoint that is shared. That's kind of like if you think of your arm as an angle, it's your elbow.
And then we need to find two rays that form angle P. So remember, rays has a dot and an arrow, and those are PQ and PR. They start with P, which is the dot, and continue with the arrow, which is Q and R.
And then angles can be named in multiple different ways. You must use 3 letters, and the vertex must always be the center letter. So when they're talking about angle P, we can also call it angle QPR, kind of like connecting the dots. You can go the other way, angle RPQ, and then just angle P if the angle is by itself. If you have an adjacent angle there, you can't just say angle P because you wouldn't know what you're talking about. But in this case, because we're just looking at angle P, it's fine to call it that.
Then the last one, we got a point that's in the interior of angle P, and that will be S. You just need to remember that interior is inside the angle, and that's the only letter S.
Now, shading the angle, again, we're just trying to get you to understand how to follow the letters to look at the angle. So if I say angle X, Y, Z, we kind of follow those with our tracing, but it's not those lines, it's not those rays, it's the angle, it's the opening of them. So it's how many degrees they open to create that angle. So that's what shading it would look like.
And then the two angles that make it up are just the two angles inside of it, which would be XYA and AYZ.
And here is where we can start connecting them to finding missing angles, solving for variables. It's all about labeling. So they tell you information to start. Angle XYZ is 67. That's how I would mark that. I would follow XYZ. It's that entire angle, that's 67 degrees. And then angle XYR, which is part of that, is 41. Now I'm using different colors, so that makes it easy. If the colors are helpful, please always use different colors when you are working through geometry with us. Visual is better. So hopefully you realize, like, oh, I just need to subtract to find that missing piece. So it's 26 degrees.
Here's one that's a little harder. So it tells us that XYZ is 72. So the whole entire thing again. And then we have some variables here. So we have XYR is 2x plus 6. And then RYZ is 4x minus 2. So we have the whole entire thing in two pieces here. So hopefully you see that all we got to do here is take those two expressions, add them together, and equal 72. And all you got to do from that point is solve for x. But remember, you need to make sure that you answer the question completely. It said find angle RYZ. So when you find what that x is, plug it into that expression and get your answer.
Okay, the next one we're using some vocabulary. So ray YR is the angle bisector, okay? Underline that word bisector. That's like a huge hint of what to do. They're letting you know that those two pieces are congruent. When it says bisector, we know because of the definition that it is creating two congruent angles. Therefore, we know that those two angles can be set equal to solve for x. In geometry, you must always reread the question to find out what it's asking for. In this case, it's asking for the measure of angle XYZ, which is the entire thing. So that would be 44 degrees when you substitute x back in and solve.
Now we have some special angles that we're going to talk about. So first is complementary. In complementary, you need to know that the sum of those angles are 90 degrees.
Versus supplementary, they're going to have a sum of 180. For those of you who are always like, oh, I can't remember which one's which, I like to think of it in alphabetical order. C comes before S, 90 comes before 180, if that's helpful as you're trying to remember the difference between those two.
Next one we have adjacent, and again we saw that earlier in the video. Adjacent just means two angles that are next to each other and share a vertex.
Linear. So linear are a special kind of adjacent. A linear pair are adjacent angles who create a line together. So they are going to be supplementary because they're going to add to 180, but we call it a linear pair when they have that specific relationship.
And then the last one is vertical angles, and those are formed by two intersecting lines. And the way that I like to see about it is V and vertical. They're kind of as a V there with 3 and 4. You can see that they're kind of making a V a little bit there, just so you have something to remember it by.
Okay, so now we're going to use some of that vocabulary to solve for some angles. So measure of angle CFB, when you read this M, that you read that as the measure of angle CFB. You're looking for that if angle AFC is a straight angle. So we draw our attention to angle AFC. We know that that's 180. The angle that they have labeled there is 78, so we just subtract from 180 to get 102.
So we have for this one, angle EFA is an angle that is congruent to angle DFE, and you need to know that congruent just means the same. That's just the main thing that you need to remember. So if angle EFA is 51, then that means DFE will be 51.
And then in 11, we have the measure of angle EFC, knowing that angle DFC is congruent to angle AFB. This is what we were talking about with needing to be able to read geometry. All this is telling you is that these two things are equal. So then you would go to angle AFB. You see that that's 78. So DFC is also 78. We kind of label that in our picture. And then from there, you're going to add them up because EFC is that whole thing.
And then we got if CFG, if FG is the angle bisector. So again, you got to remember that angle bisector means that you're going to just cut in half to make two congruent angles. So you can see just 102 divided by 2, and that gives you 51.
Okay, now we're going to do the same thing, but basically it's in a sentence. So again, what we want to point out, I know this one says supplementary, but that one word, I could change it to, it's off a little bit here, but I could change that to complementary, I could change that to vertical, I could change that to anything. That's going to change what we do. So because it says supplementary, we're going to add and set equal to 180. But if it said complementary, we would add and set it equal to 90. If it said vertical, we would set them equal to each other instead of setting them equal to 180. So that vocabulary word really pushes the rest of this work along for you. So after we know it's supplementary, that tells us we add and set equal to 180. We solve for x, we substitute back in, and we move on because we're correct.
Next one, we got AB is perpendicular to DE at that point C there. You need to know perpendicular lines give you congruent right angles. You're going to hear us say a lot of that from now on. So it says if FEC is 32, what is angle ACF? So you need to know that that is 90 degrees, and all you're going to do is do 90 subtract 32.
For this next one, find the missing angles. This is a more visual one. So we have 20 degrees. Now the vertical angles are across from each other. Vertical angles are always congruent. Complementary angles next to each other that are adjacent, they add to 90 in this case because that 90-degree angle. So I can find that 70 right there that I highlighted because 90 minus 20 is 70. And then from there, if I kind of keep following the line, I see that I have 90 on the right side because of the 90 on the left side. From there, if I continue the pattern, it's going to go 90 on the opposite side, and then 70 is across from the 70, 20 is across from the 20, and again, that would be the vertical angles. It's, again, a very visual pattern, but when the angles make the V, as Ms. Perrier said, for the vertical, those are the ones that are going to be equal, and then we got the linear triple there, where all three of those added up to 180.
This one, we got to sketch angle 1 and 2 so that they are adjacent. So then, again, you just need to remember that adjacent is next to. So for this one, you just have to draw out your angles that are next to one another.
So give it a go for all of these. Go ahead and try the sketching because we know that you can do it. And then for 18 and 19, we're just doing vocabulary. So supplement of A comes from supplementary. It just means to subtract it from 180. Same thing with complement of A. That means to subtract it from 90. And then go ahead and try to sketch the vertical angles down at the bottom. Next one is vocabulary.
So this one we got a complementary. So again, you just need to remember complementary means add up to 90. So we're just going to take angle R and angle S, add them up together, and set them equal to 90. So we got x equal 14. So we don't have an exact answer here. So we have to make sure we plug each of x back into R and S to see what our answer will be. And we can see that R is a huge.
And then this last chunk here, we would like you to do as an assignment. We're going to go over this first thing in class when we see you tomorrow or whatever day we see you next, depending on when you're watching this. And we will go over it then. So have a wonderful day and we'll see you later.